Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you, Archbishop, for that suitable introduction to start the morning. And good morning to everyone. Good to see so many persons registered for this seminar. I see 306 persons. I'd like to give my reflection a more specific theme, and that theme is from intentional disciples to integrated leaders for the synodal journey. From intentional disciples to integrated leaders for the synodal journey. And I'd like to draw on the wisdom of Anthony de Mello, the Indian Jesuit spiritual writer, on a story that he uses called the story of the salt doll. So he says that the salt doll, after a long pilgrimage on dry land, came to the sea and discovered something she had never seen and could not possibly understand. She stood on the firm ground, a solid little doll of salt, and saw there was another ground that was mobile, insecure, noisy, strange, and unknown. And she asked the sea, but what are you? And it said, I am the sea. And the doll said, what is the sea? To which the answer was, it is me. Then the doll said, I cannot understand, but I want to. How can I? The sea answered, touch me. So the doll shyly put forward her foot and touched the water, and she got a strange impression that it was something that began to be knowable. She withdrew her leg, looked and saw that her toes had gone. And she was afraid and said, oh, but where is my toe? What have you done to me? And the sea said, you have given something in order to understand. Gradually, the water took away small bits of the doll's salt, and the doll went further and further into the sea. And at every moment, she had a sense of understanding more and more, and yet of nothing being able to say what the sea was. As she went deeper, she melted more and more, repeating, but what is the sea? And at last, a wave dissolved the rest of her, and the doll said, it is I. On the journey to the sea, the identity of the sea doll is clearly distinct from the sea. But with her entrance into the sea, her identity becomes one with the sea. Her essence as a salt doll remains, but in the sea, she becomes part of a larger mission of the sea. In Christian tradition, intentional discipleship describes a follower of Jesus Christ who journeys from searching to a fundamental option to be absorbed into a larger mission of Jesus Christ. The journey from searching to commitment or intentional discipleship is captured in the lyrics of the song that many of us are familiar with. Lose yourself in me and you will find yourself. And this is what happened to the salt doll. And the second verse goes, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground, it still remains but a grain of wheat, but it falls and dies and it bears much fruit. Lose yourself in me. As in the allegory of the salt doll, the theme of the journey is witnessed in the narrative of the Emmaus disciples in Luke's Gospel, chapter 24, 13 to 35. It's a gospel narrative that many of us are familiar with. We hear it every Easter. The two disciples journeyed from seeking for the meaning of the Christ event to a decision to be an intentional disciple of Christ, whom they eventually discovered at the end of the meal. Remember when they said, did not our hearts burn within us when he talked to us? So on this journey, the disciples encountered the risen Christ, they experienced conversion, they chose to be intentional disciples, rejoined the community, and embarked on a mission to tell their story. In fact, the bishops of Latin America and the Caribbean discussed these stages towards intentional discipleship in their 2007 document, Aparecida, on missionary disciples, and they refer to it as 5 fundamental aspects of the process of forming missionary disciples. Forming missionary disciples. And so the first is encounter with Jesus Christ. And the bishops have this to say. The bishop says, those who will be his disciples are already seeking him, but it is the Lord who calls them, follow me. And the bishops go on to say that the deeper meaning of this search must be discovered. And the encounter with Christ is what leads them to discovering that deeper meaning. The second is conversion. Quote, it is essential. It is the essential response of those who have listened to the Lord in wonder, who believe in him through the action of the Spirit, and who decided to be his friend and go with him, changing how they think, how they live, accepting the cross of Christ, conscious that dying to sin is attaining new life. Discipleship. The person constantly matures in knowledge, love, and following of Jesus the Master, and delves deeper into the mystery of his person. For example, in his teaching. Ongoing catechesis and sacramental life are the fundamental importance for this stage. Communion. There can be no Christian life except in community. And I love to underline that in families, parishes, communities of consecrated life, basic communities and other small communities and movements. The disciples take part in the life of the church and in the encounter with brothers and sisters, living the love of Christ in solidarity in fraternal life. They're also accompanied and encouraged by the community and by shepherds as they mature in the life of the Spirit. And finally, mission. As they get to know and love their Lord, disciples experience the need to share with others their joy at being sent, at going to the world to proclaim Jesus Christ, dead and risen, to make real the love and the service of the person of the neediest. Mission, the document says, is inseparably from discipleship, and hence it must not be understood as a stage subsequent to formation. So what we're seeing is that the end result of this ongoing journey or seeking, searching, is a fundamental option to become an intentional disciple who is an ambassador, who are now ambassadors, not for themselves, but for Christ. St. Paul puts it very, very succinctly and clearly in his letter to the Church of Galatia. He says, it is not I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So intentional disciples are deliberately formed. And I like to underline this. Intentional disciples are deliberately formed. It's not accidental. In fact, in a course on the spirituality of synodality that is being conducted currently at St. Michael's Theological College online, two participants in a breakout room attributed their commitment to the Catholic faith and to the mission of the church to the formation they received by a particular priest, not in the same parish, 2 different parishes that the priest served. And when I listened to that testimony, the only thing that came to my mind was that it was obvious that the ministry of this priest was to form intentional disciples. This testimony points to the role of ecclesial communities and parishes to become houses of formation for intentional disciples. Formation of intentional disciples begin with a spirit and an attitude of hospitality, of welcoming. Transitions to quality time spent to listen to the stories, the wounded and painful stories of those who have been invited, unfolds helping persons to interpret the events of their lives in light of Jesus's own life through catechesis, Bible study, and then solidifies by community participation, such as the Eucharist. So, therefore, every parish, every ecclesial communities is exhorted to design, and in many instances, redesign faith formation programs modeled after the narrative of the Emmaus journey, with these 5 stages, with a stated, clearly stated purpose of forming intentional disciples, from whom integrated leaders emerge to facilitate the synodal journey. What are the benefits of intentional discipleship to the church? Intentional disciples gift the church with integrated leaders who follow Jesus. Chris Lowney makes it very clear in his book, where he looks at the tension between discipleship and leadership. In his book, Chris Lowney has this to say. He says, that's the dynamic of Christian life. We lead and follow. If people do only one or the other, we are not fully living our call. That is, our leadership must be rooted in Jesus, followership of Jesus's way and of our church's belief. If those informal governance roles, like priests and bishops, are not expanding opportunities for lay talent to lead, then they are not fulfilling their roles either. So, considering this tension between follower and leader, or discipleship and leadership, Lowney at the leadership seminar or conference in 2019 recommended to participants 4 needs of the church. 1, the church, he says, needs to lead in a voca moment, and I'll go into that in a little while. 2, create a culture where everyone leads. Improve our leadership skills. Form laity that is co-responsible. What Chris Lowney is recommending in general is that the church needs integrated leaders, integrated persons rather, to lead the people of God, especially through vocal moments, form leadership culture among everyone, improve leadership skills, and form a co-responsible laity. VOCA, as you know, is the acronym for volatile, like uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situation. So Chris Lowney's first challenge is to be able to lead in vocal moments. You know, the coronavirus pandemic, which arrived in the Caribbean in March of 2020, around March of 2020, is one of those vocal moments, as we've always been talking about. You see, the pandemic severely challenged and tested, number one, our spirituality, our faith. It severely challenged and tested our emotional capacity to live with restriction. 3, it severely challenged and tested our intellectual capacity to think clearly. 4, it challenged and tested our social and communal capabilities to live in confinement without killing each other. In some instances, the pandemic threatened and shattered our integrity, our wholeness as human beings, and also our communities, our families, our parishes. In this regard, only integrated leaders parents, educators, clergy, politicians, heads of communities. Only integrated leaders can lead a group or community through vocal moments, because vocal moments affects all aspects of our humanity, our spiritual life, our intellectual life, our human life, our communal life. And to be able to successfully manage and negotiate vocal moments, we need integrated leaders. If Pope Francis's dream for the Synod journey is for the people of God to mature in listening to each other and the Holy Spirit, especially within the context of the pandemic, then the church needs to form integrated leaders with the requisite skills to lead in vocal moments of history. In this regard, Pope Francis is an example of an integrated leader. LOWNEY'S second challenge is to create a culture where everyone leads and to create a laity that is co-responsible. Both are related. The reality, brothers and sisters, is that no bishop, no priest, no parent, no principal, no boss, no manager can establish and reinforce adequate rules that govern every single behavior, or be physically present everywhere, or has the power to watch over everyone at the same time. That's a reality. If you attempt to govern in this manner, you end up disempowering people and establish an autocratic governance system. For this reason and others, the Synod theme of communion and participation calls everyone, the people of God, to become leaders. That's what LOWNEY was saying to us in 2019. Hence, Pope Francis writes in Evangelii Gaudium, he says, the bishop will sometimes go before his people, pointing the way and keeping their hope vibrant. And yet at other times, he will have to walk after them, helping those who lag behind, and above all, allowing the flock to strike out on new paths. In a word, communion and participation is a call for everyone to lead. So here we are seeing LOWNEY saying this in 2019, and then Pope Francis is saying communion participation in 2021. LOWNEY'S third challenge calls everyone to lead. LOWNEY'S third challenge is to improve, rather, our leadership skills. Okay, what are the skills integrated leaders need? I'm going to go through a few of them. I won't go in detail in all of them because my colleague who is presenting later will go more in detail. But the first skill that integrated leaders need is that of a spiritual intelligence. I say that if intentional disciples have an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ, then leaders need to learn and practice three things that have been reinforced in Archbishop's introduction. One, the skill of listening. Two, the skill of discerning. And three, the skill of acting. Spiritual intelligence. To gain spiritual maturity, we must find a way, for example, to set aside the chaos we experience as religious leaders. To do so, we must seek solitude so we can focus on our relationship with God. It is in these quiet times that we are drawn into the depths of our being, where we come face to face with ourselves and our weakness and with the ultimate mystery of God. So that's the first skill that integrated leaders need. The second skill is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence has been defined as simply the ability to monitor one's and other people's emotions, to differentiate between the different emotions and label them appropriately, and to use emotional information to guide thinking and behaving. Again, I won't go in much in that because that's going to be dealt with later. So integrated leaders require well-developed emotional intelligence because so much of our work as parents, as priests, as clergy, as teachers involves helping people with their own emotional needs. And also so much of leadership roles are stressful, as we witness in the risen Christ encounter with the two disciples. Consequently, it is critical, Roy Oswald and others say, it is critical that we become emotionally and spiritually mature to assist others adequately. As one religious leader warned, people aren't always emotionally healthy themselves when they are trying to help others. That's the problem when people go into the business of helping people. The third skill is that of conversational intelligence. Conversational intelligence is related to the ability to engage in quality conversation that builds trust, bonding, and community. Friendships and community building rely so much on conversational intelligence, and integrated leaders develop the ability to use conversation not to isolate, not to alienate, not to ostracize, but to include and value everyone. If you wish to see conversational intelligence at work by an integrated leader, again, read carefully the Emmaus story, and you see the end results of such healthy conversation, reconciliation, and community. A fourth leadership skill is what is called wonder intelligence. In a retreat talk to the priest of the Archdiocese of Porto, Spain, on the feast of St. John Vianney, August 4 this year, Bishop Socrates Villegas of the Philippines spoke of wonder intelligence or imaginative leadership. He describes it as the capacity to dream dreams and to make those dreams come through, like St. Joseph the carpenter. It is a bold and daring leadership, he says, expanding the horizon and testing our limits. It is not satisfying for the minimum, but maximizing one's potential. So integrated leaders have the ability to dream dreams like Pope Francis, is what an integrated leader does. The dreams, not for themselves, but for the community they lead. So in closing, I say that Jesus Christ is an integrated leader who purposefully formed intentional disciples. He calls together a motley group of individuals, not based on qualifications, but on faith. Journeys with them until they commit to becoming intentional disciples. Some did, some didn't. And from among them, he chose integrated leaders, formed integrated leaders. The Church of the Archdiocese of Porto, Spain is invited to use the Emmaus model to form intentional disciples who will become the source from which integrated leaders emerge. Priests, parents, teachers, clergy, deacons, principals. Formed in the heart and mind of Jesus, these leaders will be capable of journeying with the people of God, especially through VOCA-like moments. And the pandemic is one of many. There will be more VOCA moments to come. So the Emmaus model of faith formation is necessary at all levels of church life: the parish, the diocese, the commissions, the ecclesial communities, religious communities, to aim to form disciples who will lose themselves to the wider mission of Jesus Christ. In the end, without intentional discipleship, there is no integrated leaders. And therefore, we must make our focus in forming intentional disciples so that the church can have integrated leaders to lead the people of God, especially through VOCA-like moments.
Thank you very much, Father Don. You have a question for them, for the participants? Yes, hello. Okay, so the question for your participants in your breakout rooms is, and it's in the chat, information programs discuss practical ways in which parishes and ecclesial communities can form intentional disciples to become integrated leaders. So as you go into your breakout rooms of 4, please note the number of your room, because we're going to call your number for giving feedback after. So we would like you to just introduce yourselves as you enter the room, because you will be spending the morning in the same groups and you'll be journeying together throughout the morning. Ask somebody to moderate the discussion to ensure maximum participation. Ask somebody to keep time, and ask somebody just to take some notes that you can feed back to us on the link provided in the chat. So the question is in the chat, and we will now send you into your groups of 4 persons as we begin discussions. You have about 15 minutes to have this discussion. Remember, a minute of silence or 2 in the beginning, and when you have shared and listened to one another, a couple minutes of silence in the end, and then we bring you back into groups for some feedback. Thank you very much. You go into your breakout rooms now, please. It will come on your screen to join the group that you're in. So you just click yes, join.